with the mass of you that's standing here, I don't know how I want to do this, but I'm definitely going to have to do fewer than all of you. If I could just go ahead and have all of you stand in your nice long line on the neutral here.
Oh, we all start on it.
Whoa!
I thought we had to go forward.
This is going to be way too many, but we'll see where people shake out. And then if there's a long line behind one of these, I'll have you go and do the conversation with a one-on-one with some folks. Okay? So let's try it that way because this is way too many. All right, so the claim is the U.S. government should ban animal testing. We have the possible positions of strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, slightly disagree, and strongly disagree. So think where you are. I'm going to count down to 1. When I get to 1, I want you to move to the position that you hold on this claim. The U.S. government should ban animal testing. 3, 2, 1, and move.
Why do I know exactly
Okay, so we have a lot behind slightly disagree, and we have a lot behind slightly agree. Can I keep 2 people? Okay, can I keep 2 of you here so we don't have this go on for eternity? Can 2 of you stay here? And the rest of you volunteer to go do one-on-ones? And can have 2 of you volunteer to stay here? Oscar, I liked your conversation yesterday. I'm going to keep you. Let's go. Let's go. And one of you volunteer to stick around?
I'll step back.
Okay. You're
Wayne
stay,
Sologi
Marcus?
debate class incoming. Let's go.
All right. And with this whole long line here, I really appreciate it. It's just way too many people. This activity will go on for eternity. But you can observe or you can participate one-on-one.
My mom said
Okay.
I feel like your mom would.
Okay. Can I have at least 2 here though? Because there was a long line. One of you can stick around. Maddie, you want to stick around? Awesome. Yes, you can do different claims for that. Okay, now we got a nice spread. We have strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, slightly disagree. We don't have anyone on disagree, but we do have someone on strongly disagree. Okay, so I want you to take a moment to think what is the reasons that you have, and now that we definitely have people at the tail ends, before I ask you what your reasons are, I'd like you to think, what do you think would be the best reason for the person that disagrees with you on the other side? So, Byron, I want you to think for a minute. If folks, you can take your phone out if you have a phone or something else to write this down. Write down either in your phone or on a notepad or whatever you might have, or if you can remember it, that's fine too. But what do you think, and just make a note to yourself, what do you think would the best reason for standing, Baron? So what I'm asking you, Baron, is what is the best reason that someone that stands with strongly agree would have? Try to think what that is.
Would have to move or would have to stand there?
No, what would be the best reason to your mind for someone to hold this position of strongly agree over here?
All right, so mine would be slightly agree with the person
Okay.
I'd be asking, right?
Or anywhere on this, what do you think the best reason is for the other side of the river, if you will? Same for you folks here, that you agree with this claim. What do you think is the best reason for these folks to disagree? I'll give you a minute to think about that. All right, Baron. What do you think is the best reason that someone might hold or strongly agree with the U.S. government being animal testing?
Because they don't want to, like animals feel pain and
for that cosmetic and like the other industries.
Okay.
The main part is protect animals.
Okay. Is that your reason?
Yeah,
Okay.
with many caveats.
Okay, with many caveats, but that's your reason. Okay. What's your name?
I'm Antonia.
Antonia. Okay, nice to meet you. What do you think would be the best reason for someone to disagree or on this side? What do you think their best reason is?
Probably the perceived benefits to human beings, like medical trials or cosmetic testing. We see the products of that research to be beneficial towards us and be worth it.
Okay. Is that your reason?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have really good understanding, empathy for other folks. I'll go ahead and ask folks now for their reasons beyond just what we've sort of identified here. Would you like to add anything to that? Or otherwise I'll go to blanking on my name here. Tate, that's right. Okay.
Add anything to his point.
To your point, what's
Yeah.
your best reason?
I guess just like my reasoning for why we shouldn't cause pain to animals, kind of like on more Kantian grounds of ethics, is that like we don't have the right to use other sentient beings as a means for our own pleasure or benefit. So even if those benefits of medical testing are really incredible, which it's very arguable that they're not, because so many medical trials, the way that they end up, the way that we test mainly on mice in the medical industry. But we don't have a right, even if it does benefit us, to inflict pain on other sentient beings for our own gain. It's kind of just like a basic fundamental understanding of ethics that forms my view on this.
Okay, thank you. Tate, what's your reason for agreeing? And perhaps why not strongly agree? Why do you agree?
I put myself at agree because I could still see like there are some benefits, and I try to look at it like only through the animal's perspective of it does benefit like some medical testing, and like rabies vaccination did help them in the end because they don't have rabies anymore, even if it was to protect us so we didn't get it from them. Vaccine is still being developed. That said, it's like not our place to decide how and when other creatures should be used, especially for our own economic gain most of the time.
Okay.
Yes.
Kate, okay. Slightly agree. Why
Yeah.
slightly agree?
I would say because I think in terms of like cosmetics and like I feel like there's no reason to test on animals for that, but I can see the side of like medical trials, but there's just something that like sits wrong with me about using another, whether it's a human or an animal, as like a means to an end, like using them to get to an end without like any consideration for like what they'll have to go through.
Okay. And Maddie, what's your thoughts? Why are you also slightly agree?
Well, yesterday in class I was agree, but then by the end of it I moved to slightly agree because of what Ozzy said about like he gave an example of chimpanzees being tested like cognitive games just to like learn more about them, and I didn't really think about that as considered to be animal testing, but now that I do, I can see some of the benefits of animal testing, but I also, like these people, think that in a lot of ways it's unethical, and there are scientific alternatives that we could create to test on instead of animals.
Okay. And since you brought up Oscar's point from yesterday, I think I'll go ahead and ask Oscar to share that, and we'll get, remind me one more time your name?
Antonia.
She did not have an opportunity to hear that conversation, so Oscar made a point yesterday that changed some folks' minds. I want to hear how you would contemplate that.
All right, let's see if I can try and remember the phrasing I used. So I'm on the point of slightly disagree. I think that there are a lot of concerns with animal safety, and things like cosmetic trials are usually issues that can arise in terms of the safety of the animal, whether it be burning skin or hair. But I do think that there are a lot of benefits to animal testing in things such as disease research. A lot of people seem to forget that a lot of diseases originate from mosquitoes, so I totally believe that mosquito testing to find out disease origins and maybe even possible cures is definitely a must-have. I think that also, going back to the cognitive research, testing chimpanzees and their cognitive abilities can lead to a lot of benefits in memory and studies of Alzheimer's and other dementia-based issues. What else did I say? Yeah.
Could I nudge
Talked
you
about
to
the implication.
describe the chimpanzee testing a little bit more so we get a picture of what you're talking about?
Right. Well, chimpanzees
We're
physically.
not poking them with stuff.
Yeah.
We're
No.
doing cognitive exercises, right?
Yeah, chimpanzees, in terms of biology, are the most physically similar to our species of Homo sapien. Higher brain function, thumbs, they even show signs of being able to communicate. So being able to test them with brain games such as, forgetting the name of the game, but it's where you move the pieces of the tower over and you try to get it without stacking a bigger piece on top of a smaller piece. So testing things like that can help learn more about not just chimpanzees, but our own anatomy and biology and brain studies and how we can apply that to different studies.
Okay. All right. And since this is the first you've heard of this, and some of these folks have heard that, what's your thoughts on Oscar's argument?
I think that's a super great point, that there's forms of animal testing, you would call it, that are very palatable to us, like a university setting where someone's studying psychology through chimps, but that's simply just not what animal testing is really looking like when you're thinking about chimps being tested. I don't know if this is the right word, vivisection, live dissection, things like that. We're at Maine State universities all around the United States. That's actively happening. They have laboratories where that's going on. That's the kind of testing I imagine when you bring up a word like chimps or monkeys and things like that. Also, I would just invite you to question, like, what is it that gives us to the right to assert our power over them? Like, I feel like you would agree that taking like a handicapped child or some sort of human that has like a 5-year-old child, things like that, that has the cognitive ability of like an animal, like a pig has about the intelligence of a 5-year-old child. I don't think you would say that taking them and putting them through testing simply because they're not humans like us would be right. So like, what's the trait that allows us to exert that power over them? What makes it right?
Well, I would treat studies of animals the same way we treat studies of humans. I mean, we're not really pouring acids on people to see if their skin has a different reaction. I mean, yeah, in allergy testing, they do stuff like that, but that's ultimately for the betterment of the person. I think that, as I said before, I think that things such as poking and prying and tearing apart an animal that is live, sentient, and has emotions is wrong. That's why I'm in the slightly disagree category. But I do think that, what was I going to say? Testing animals is wrong in the sense of physical hurt, but in the overall benefits to us as a society, I think that the benefits further outweigh the cost of the detriments to one particular animal that could save millions of lives through the research that is conducted through it. So,
Utility.
yeah, even the lives of that same species. Like an example would be, I recently did my semester abroad in Australia, and a big issue they're having down there right now is with the koalas and the spread of chlamydia, which is a sexually transmitted disease, and a lot of koalas are dying from it. And so they're right now trying to study how these koalas are getting chlamydia, how to get rid of the chlamydia, and ultimately try and increase the population of the koala. And through that, there is a lot of animal testing to try and see why that koala died. For the most part, from what I heard from researchers down there, they're testing already dead koalas that died from those diseases. And so it's all about trying to figure it out for the betterment of their species as well, not just ours.
Okay, now I want to hear from Marcus and Elba. I'm going to put a pause for one thing that I think we need to do before we continue. As we do, we need to define our terms. So we have animal testing, and I'm hearing a lot of people conjure up different idea in their head of what that is. So let's see if we can converge or agree or on this term. So what actually constitutes animal testing, what are the criteria that would make think something qualifies? So some of the things that I'm hearing where there's difference, the animal is alive or dead is one point of contention. Another point of contention is physical testing versus psychological testing, and whether testing entails harm or non-harm. So what do we mean by what is animal testing? I'll start here and we'll just move around, see if we can get any consistent. What does animal testing mean?
Physical testing.
Like physical,
Chemical.
physical or chemical. Okay. And Oscar?
Any process in which a scientific method is applied to a species non-human in order to determine the benefits of cures and or cognitive ability.
I'm not going to write all that, but that was fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see if other people agree with that. So scientific method. No, you're right.
Yeah, like tearing apart an animal is not, it's not scientific. If there's a specific purpose for why you are dissecting that creature, I think that is the good way to go, the ethical way to go, I should say.
Oh, so something with purpose?
Yeah, there has to be a purpose involved. You can't just tear something apart just because you want to see what it looks like on the inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Marcus, what conjures up in your mind when you hear animal testing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very much so in agreement with what Oscar said about the scientific method. I think it's like any time that you take an animal out of their natural, like more so like existence, and you perform some sort of scientific test on them, whether that's cognitive or physical, and alter their behavior or well-being in some way.
Okay.
So.
Al, what's your take?
I would say a physical scientific test that can see what kind of reaction some sort of product or thing causes.
Okay. Does it necessarily have to entail harm, or could it be non-harm?
I don't know. I feel like both. Like it depends on what it is.
Okay.
To me.
Maddie, anything that you would add, change?
I was thinking about maybe like exploratory testing.
Okay.
Could be more on the unethical side of it, because it doesn't have like a purpose. I mean, it doesn't have a scientific method. Because I feel like a lot of times people maybe just want to learn things about a species. People want to learn things about a species without knowing what they're looking for. So that may lead to some unethical testing.
Okay. Katie, anything you want to add?
I agree with like the physical and chemical testing, but I would also add like behavioral into that.
Okay, behavioral.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know.
Tag it.
So this is thinking like the example that Oscar.
Yeah, like performing like any kind of test, whether it has like physical effects on the animal or just like more psychological or whatever.
Okay.
The only difference I might put in is like reaction results, because most of the time animal testing we're trying to find like the result to reaction, I'd say.
Okay, so reaction. Which could be behavioral, physical, or chemical reaction.
Yes.
And what would you add? How would you change your attitude?
I really agree with what Oscar said about just, like, applying the scientific method to an animal, but I would change that it's for human purposes. So like medical trials, cosmetic trials, things like that. Because when I take my dog to the vet and get them tested for disease, you're testing on an animal, but I don't consider that animal testing. I'm considering like really large systematic things to produce products and things like that for human consumption or other purposes. Maybe it is to benefit animals in the long run, but it's very like large scale research to yeah.
Would your position change a bit if it's animal testing for animals? So if the reason for testing animals is for the purpose of that animal species, would you be a little more open? So are you in other words, do you hold your position because the way that you just conceptualized it, and the word does the way we're thinking about this point change. How do I put it? Complicated in the way that it would change your view on it.
I think even animal testing, I think that animal testing in like the context of this question of like animal testing that's considering being banned is like medical testing and cosmetic testing and things like that, not like smaller scale research. But I guess I do oppose really kind of any objectification and commodification of an animal. So it does include, yeah, you're right, it does include even testing for other animals.
Okay. So well, I guess we can keep that in the cluster. So, all right. The U.S. government should ban animal testing with physical, chemical, scientific, methods, behavioral reactions. So this is some of our conceptions. There's a good bit of overlap, maybe a little bit of divergence, but let's try to stay on the same page as the best that we can here. Now, let me ask Baron, what would it take for you to decrease your confidence by 1 degree? So from strongly disagree to disagree. What evidence would you need to see, or what would you need to see?
If there's 100% proof, like bioengineered artificial test environments, like published, maybe I will. But that means if we can create an artificial test, like alternative.
Oh, I see. So you say if we can come up with an alternative,
yeah,
that is equally viable to animal testing,
yeah,
then you would be willing to
100%, but not 99%.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you the same question, but I just realized I forgot to get to Marcus and health, so I want to hear why you hold the position that you do. So Marcus, you're on slightly disagree.
Yeah.
Why do you hold that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very complex topic. There's a lot to unpack, but I think that especially after like coming up with the definition of like kind of what we identify or what we classify as animal testing, there's a lot to be said with the type of testing that's being done, whether it's harmful or not. And I think there's a lot of testing that can be done without, maybe it affects the animal, but it doesn't provide a lot of harm or inflict a lot of harm to it. And there comes with a lot of significant benefit with like medical understanding and results. And so I think just from that perspective, I kind of slightly disagree.
Okay. And Elle, what's your take?
I am neutral because I'm kind of like on both sides. I can hear everybody's point and understand it. So I'm not necessarily against it or for it, because I do think, like on this side, everybody's point of how it's unethical and it can cause like harm, and you don't really necessarily want to do that to something that can't, I guess, like consent in a way. And then on this side, I agree that it can be good to just see how something can cause a reaction, since animals are very closely, especially like different types of monkeys, they are like have the same kind of DNA and makeup as us, so it would just tell us what the reaction would be if they had a reaction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now I'm going to come over here again because I'm on the far end. What would it take, and maybe Tate, I'll ask you the same thing since you're on agree. But since you're on strongly agree, what evidence would you need to see? And what would it take you to move, not all the way over there, but just move one line from strongly agree to agree?
I think I'm probably on agree right now if our definition of animal testing is like testing for the sake of animals. So the case where you're testing koalas who have already passed away for chlamydia, though like they can't consent to that situation, which is I think an ethical misstep for me. I think it's a justified ethical misstep, which I don't like to say because I do kind of believe in like the absolute like non-commodification of people like of animals that can't consent and things like that. But I think I'm on agree because of those edge cases. But I think that you would actually have to ban all animal testing. You might have to ban all animal testing in the United States to get to the point of banning the majority of animal testing, which is the kind that I think most of us, if we saw in person, would be horrified by and wouldn't be able to perform ourselves.
Thank you. And Tate, what would it take for you to move just one line from agree to slightly agree?
I'm kind of still thinking about that because a lot of this conversation we've been talking about testing specifically on chimpanzees, and that is the animal I find the most problematic to be testing with. So if anything, I'm finding myself more like closer to going up towards strongly agree than that. Because a big point throughout this discussion has been like how similar they are to us. Because chimpanzees share 98% of our genetic makeup and like our DNA, and the two big main differences are their cognitive abilities and their bone structure. Like their legs are connected to their like ribs and stuff. But yeah, having them be so close to us genetically and cognitively, I think we should view it more not as like, oh, look at this like cadaver essentially that we can run experiments on. It's essentially a less cognitive developed human, and it's just something that should like need our help, because while it can't create, it definitely still can feel and process emotion, which is the most unethical in mine. And they can build and bond relationships. So like, say you're the scientist who's the head researcher for him, even if you're just giving cognitive tests, like let's say it's a male chimp. Once the chimp reaches 4 years old, it's gonna reach puberty, go insane, and like no matter how close you are, no matter how much you like cognitively condition it, it's still gonna rip off your face at the end of the day because it's a wild animal, and that 2% is still big enough to make up a difference between us, which therefore also renders our tests not necessary if there's a big enough gap.
One thing I'm hearing in your contemplation of this is, it sounds like to me that, especially around chimpanzees, that one of the reasons that you hold the position that you do is because animal testing activates the empathy impulse that we have. And do you think that is part of the cluster of why you stand where you do, is empathy?
I think a big part of it is empathy, but also, as like the last part of my point was, if that 2% is still that big of a gap that like we don't share the same like body, and like we still have different like causes, like a chimp stomach can eat a whole lot worse things than we can and stuff. So like I think that 2% is still big enough a difference that like it still renders it like ineffective.
And I guess the follow-up from this is, I'm thinking about, for example, are insects count as animals? One. And if they do, does your positionality on animal testing being banned apply to insects?
So I was thinking about the claim, and had two factors. I think I really start to develop more empathy if the creature is one, mammalian, and two, has higher cognitive function, like equal to a pig or a cow or elk. That said, a pig's a lot smarter than a cow.
So do you think a dumber animal, or an animal, maybe that's not fair, an animal that does not have a developed intelligence is more acceptable to do testing?
I think it is still unethical, but I think it's more acceptable from an empathetic standpoint. That said, a mosquito and a chimp still both serve very important roles in ecosystems. So if you're looking at it ecologically, you can't pick and choose.
Okay.
But that said, empathetically, yeah, I definitely relate more to like the cognitive mammalian creatures.
How do you feel about doing animal testing on mosquitoes?
I wouldn't really mind, because I don't think insects have that much of like, they don't think. But that said, I would only start to really mind once we start affecting like ecology or like insect populations worldwide. That said, if it's done sustainably and ethically, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Welcome. What's your name?
I'm Drew. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Are you, so, U.S. government should ban animal testing. I see you're going to join the fray. Do you slightly agree? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You want to tell us your reasons?
I missed the whole debate, so I probably missed some vital
It's
information.
not quite a debate. We're
Well-
just having conversations and sharing our positions across the differences.
Okay, well, so just in general, I feel like it's wrong to test on animals, but also there's a problem that's if there's a disease that could kill humans, I feel like it says it's wrong to say it's better to test on animals, but also I don't know how else we would find a way to look for a treatment for that. So that's kind of I'm on slightly agree because I agree that it's wrong, but I don't know if there's a way around it.
Okay. And let me ask you, being on the position that you are, slightly agree, what would it take for you to move one line in the direction? What would make, not all the way to disagree, but what would shake your confidence a little bit? What would you need to hear to move to a neutral position?
It's a good question. I mean, I feel like when you're mentioning mosquitoes, I feel like mosquitoes do more harm than good, so I wouldn't mind testing on them because tons of people die from mosquito-related illnesses, but just any other animal insects or chimps, I feel like it's wrong to test on them.
Yeah, let me do a quick poll. How many of you believe that when we think of animal testing that insects qualify as animal by show of hands? Okay, all of us agree that it fits under the, okay. So when we talk about animal testing, we're also talking about insects and others. Okay, so Oscar, what would it take for you? I think, Baron, I've asked you already. What would it take for you to move one line to the other direction? What sort of evidence or reasons would you need to hear to make you less confident in your position?
Right. I don't know what it would take for me to get to move to neutral, but I definitely know what it would take for me to go to strongly agree. And that is if the question was rephrased as to, is it okay to test animals in consumer product situations with no perceived benefit to the species or to us as human beings? So, as I said before multiple times, cosmetic testing. Okay. If a certain brand of lipstick is being tested on a chimpanzee and it is in turn hurting the chimpanzee and leaving physical scars and deformities and maybe even death, that is 100% wrong in my book. So I would go to strongly agree if that was the question, but in this case the question is all animal testing bad? And I think people kind of forget what testing is exactly. Going back to ants are one of the most complex creatures in the fact that their structures of their anthills are more complex than some of the buildings we have nowadays. They're very smart creatures. And to study how they almost have this hive mind work together is definitely a benefit in terms of how we want to frame our society and perhaps even build our structures. So.
And I'll ask Marcus the same question there. What would it take you, or you could do the same as Oscar to move all the way over here, but I'm just asking, what would it take to decrease your confidence in your position just by one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Oscar brought up a very interesting point, and I'm in agreement with what he said. However, I think in order to move from slightly disagree to neutral, I think personally, I feel like I am not well informed on this topic, and so I think just kind of understanding a little bit more about kind of what treatments are being done on animals and what animal testing involves and what the vast majority of testing involves and maybe how much benefit there is to human benefit there is to doing animal testing, performing animal testing. I think that would be super beneficial for me just understanding, and perhaps maybe might make me shift left or right depending on what.
Okay. Now I'm going to try something I've never done before. Yeah. I just thought of this and I think this will be fun. So you're going to get a lot of attention, Helen, so forgive me. But because you're on neutral, what I'm going to try here is I'm going to let each person give their best reason for why they think you should move this way or that way. And then we'll see if you can change, if you feel like by the time you hear just one reason, whatever you think. So I don't want to spend a lot of time speechifying, but just what do you think the best reason is? Al, you're going to listen and see if one takes you. And then if you do move, we'll ask you why you think that is. Okay, so we'll start with Baron. We'll just go clockwise. Baron, what's your best reason why you think L should move toward disagree, at least toward slightly disagree?
Yeah, so when you look the adverse reaction list from governments, you can see more than like 70% of the notifications came from cruelty-free cosmetic like products, and that means our methodologies like failed for that.
Okay, Oscar.
Well, I think that you should move over to at least slightly disagree because the benefits of animal testing, in my opinion, outweigh the costs. The life of one chimpanzee in studying a disease that could affect millions of people is definitely a cost I'm willing to pay in terms of it can save the lives of millions of people. I think that you should stand here because, yeah, there is the issue of what if it does hurt the animal, and I'm totally against poking and probing, but the benefits of testing animal migration patterns, feeding habits, cognitive ability, and overall disease replication they further outweigh the benefits of not testing animals. So.
And Marcus?
Yeah, in addition to like Oscar's point on like human benefit of testing on animal testing, I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are many tests that can be done that do promote, human development and understanding while having
Maybe speak up just a little bit.
Okay, yeah. While having like minute or trivial effects on like animals themselves and harm being done to them.
Can I add one more point to my thing? The testing isn't only for the benefit of human beings. As I stated before with the example of the koalas, it can also be benefit to the species that is being tested as well. It's not all just for human benefit.
Okay. And in our peaceable tug of war here, Katie, why would you, what reason would you give for coming this way? Wait 1 second. People want to run their... All right, go ahead.
Okay, other than the fact that you'd be able to stand next to me, I think you should...
Which is a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. I think you should come to this side because I don't think any human being should have the capability to use another being, whether it's a human or an animal, to further their progress with something that possibly has no benefit to that animal itself. And also, especially if that animal has nothing to do with whatever problem they're trying to solve.
Okay. And I think just on the subject, like there's other ways to test like disease other than looking at like alive animals. Like I know sometimes we're like, oh, we can just test this one animal to see like how much of an effect it has, but I feel like we can just go and look at the disease itself and be like, okay, this is like the strands it has, this is like how it moves from like subject to subject. And I feel like you don't have to like inject it into like an animal in order to like see what it does. There's other ways around that.
I'm probably going to stick with the reason you should come to agree is I'm going to stick with my 2% argument for 4. So chimps share 98% of our like genetic makeup, like DNA. So there are two sides of that coin. One, that is close enough, and that's why we should test on them. That said, if it is close enough, they do share enough of our cognitive abilities and our emotions that is almost just testing on a human, which we can all agree is unethical. So why wouldn't it be unethical to test on a chimp? And on the other side of that coin, let's say that gap is too big in the 2% and they are too different from us. The data that we are extracting is then inaccurate because they're not similar enough to us to get reputable results.
I think that we can talk about these really friendly seeming edge cases all day, like the koalas and things like that, but the reality is that animal testing in the United States, it's the medical industry and it's the cosmetic industry. They're mainly using mice that are bred and then killed simply for the testing purposes, discarded of. And maybe there are benefits, but at the end of the day, I don't think that we should exert our power to cause emotional and physical abuse to other living beings simply because we like what it can do for us, the makeup it can provide for us, the medical testing, great medical testing and information it'll provide for us, because it simply is using another living being for our own ends. This is what mankind has done in every horrific overstepping of human rights, and they're doing it with animal rights too. So I just simply think that that's kind of the definition of ethics. It's abusing another being for your own gain.
Yeah, and welcome.
Thank you.
Are you?
Sorry, I am in the strongly agree.
Strongly agree. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your name?
I'm Fletcher.
Fletcher. Nice to meet you. Since you haven't had a chance to hear or tease out, go ahead and say what do you think your best reason is for strongly agreeing that the U.S. government should ban.
Yeah, I think the number one reason is a philosophical reason. It's just stance against exploitation of non-human animals. I think that animals should be. I believe that animal rights, natural animal rights, should be a logical extension to human rights that we grant, such as bodily autonomy, right to life, things of this nature. So I think that's the ultimate qualm is ethical. And if you want to talk about like empirics, it's NIH standard to kill every rat that's tested on, no matter what. So they aren't just poked and prodded a little bit and then let free. They're either, in some cases, put into shelters, but usually euthanized. And beyond that, it's standard to do animal testing for first phases, especially for things like drugs. So in phase 1 trials, we usually test on rats. Of those drugs that pass phase 1 testing, about 98% fail phase 2 testing, which is human testing. And I think that alone is evidence enough to show that the cruelty that we inflict on these animals, not only is it not justified from a philosophical standpoint, but it's not really empirically justified.
Okay, so Elle, we're putting a lot of pressure on Elle. You've heard all the arguments, maybe a few more on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this side, and 3. Well, Oscar got 2 in. So, has any of this, and you don't have to, you can stay right where you are. Has any of this made you want to move to slightly agree or slightly disagree, or you feel that you're still in the neutral position?
I was trying to really take it all in and see what side I would agree with more, but it's just every single thing that's being said makes complete sense to me, and I can see from both sides completely, and I just don't think that I can.
You haven't been pulled enough.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I've been observing here that I find interesting, and maybe we can unpack this a little bit, is for this side, it seems like the framework by which we're operating through the world is a utilitarian one. So we're doing a weighing of the cost outweigh, or the benefits outweigh the cost. And so that is a way we can operate in the world. Over here, I'm hearing more of a universal moral principles from which you operate. I don't know if there's a name for that, but perhaps. But at the basics of it with ethics is that there's moral, universal principles from which we're going to operate with. And so as we do that, we can make universal statements about how to behave in the world. What we could do now is argue about the operating system by which we so is a utilitarian, if I were to rephrase it, maybe I get a little space here. Since there's more people on this side, I'll phrase it like this.
Yeah, goodbye. Like, they're gonna go pick up a package and bring it back into me. Yeah, no, yeah. Dude, I ran a 5K in 44 minutes. There you go, kid. Did you know I was a runner? Really? Oh, golfers can be athletes. All right.
I'll let it
Yeah. This is fun.
Trust.
Folks understand what I mean by utilitarianism. If we don't understand this word, we won't be able to have this conversation. Utilitarianism is maximizing the benefits over the cost, and that's the framework by which we operate. So I phrase it like this. This is sort of like the operating system that we're using to make these moral or these decisions. So operating from universal moral principles is better than utilitarianism. Let me have you reset to neutral. We might shake out the same, we might shake out different. I'm not sure yet, but let's see how it goes. Everybody stand on neutral. Okay, and I'll repeat the claim and ask you to move on. 1, operating from universal moral principles is better than utilitarianism. 3, 2, 1, and move. Okay, we have a lot of folks on neutral now. This is very fascinating. Okay, okay, we got a whole long line back here. Okay, are you on agree or strongly agree?
Can I be in between, or do I have to?
You're going to have to pick one. I mean, it's a gradation.
All right.
We're not going to go in between gradations. Okay. So let me ask you, well, I'm going to start with the folks that actually hold a position and get to neutral folks last. Why do you strongly agree that it's best to operate from universal moral principles rather than utilitarianism?
Yeah, I think that I think it's just more coherent overall. I think if you look, especially from pure utilitarianism, negative utilitarianism, you get into like really nasty conclusions. So classic example is, okay, if we're maximizing utility, let's say we have a group of 20 people, and then we have one person. Those 20 people gain a ton of utility from beating that other person, right? They gain so much pleasure from that net utility is raised. Even though that one person has suffered, it's not as much as those 20 people have gained that amount of pleasure. That's like kind of the classic example. But I think that it's just more coherent to operate from a universal principle. It doesn't necessarily mean that the like morals are inherent. I think they can still be kind of relative, but I think there are some things that we kind of have hardwired into us to some extent. Things like not harming others and bodily autonomy, these sorts of things.
And do you think those things that are hardwired into us are coded, if you will, if I can say that?
Yeah.
From a universal moral principle or from a utilitarian?
Yeah, I think that there's some sort of overlap. So, I mean, if you go into like my personal philosophy, I think that I'm kind of like, the word's like a threshold deontologist, but it's like people should have individual rights up until a point where like utility would be so much greater. So like, you know, if it's, I don't know, that's kind of getting in the weeds. I think that what I'm getting at with the kind of inherent morals is like, actually it's funny, we're just talking about animal testing. There was an animal test done with rats where the rat was given either the option to save its fellow rat that was drowning or get food, basically. And in every single trial, the rat chose to save the other rat. It could press a button, save the other rat, over getting that food, right? And I think that there might be some sort of biological inherent principles that we've kind of inherited. And I think that ultimately makes for the best society.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we may have morality coded in us.
To some extent, yeah. I think there's a lot of nuance and some of it's very relative. But.
I guess, and I'm going to put a pin in this, but I'll ask the question for you to think about. What percent of human activity, and moral activity to be more specific, is biologically coded, assuming that is something we hold as true, and what percent is a product of cultural? So something to think about. Okay.
I'll see you in 30 minutes.
For those of you that agree, why is it that you think that operating from a universal moral principle is better than operating from utilitarian?
I just really hate utilitarianism. I don't know. I think like logistically, if you think about it, it like kind of makes sense until you start putting it into action. And like you said, like I think the results are just unsatisfactory. Like I don't like that's just like not. I don't want to live in like a world where things are measured by like, oh, what will like give these people like the greatest benefits versus like. And I also think it's like hard with utilitarianism because there's so many different kinds like. Based on like if like everyone's maximum utility versus like individual. So I don't know. I just hate utilitarianism.
Okay, all right.
And I'm sticking to
You
it.
have a personal.
Yeah.
Reason. Okay, I saw that you also on the animal testing you felt a little more strongly about, but in terms of the operating system, you still agree, but are less strong about it. Why is that? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. Why do you agree with this second claim? Operating from universal moral principles is better than utilitarianism.
Because, I mean, like you're talking about with defining the terms, there are a lot of ways to consider like universal moral principles. When we're talking about like utilitarianism, I'm just like, I very strongly agree that we should not operate from utilitarianism, but it just depends on like how we're defining universal moral principles. I guess I kind of agree on a combination of the both in a way that preserves that very like logical understanding of like maximizing the good for as many people as possible. So I'm not like we need to throw out all of utilitarianism because it's illogical. I just kind of believe in a mixture of the both. Like
Okay.
I understand the principle of utility makes so much sense. I want as many people to be as happy as possible, but I also believe that there are some universal moral truths. Like I think slavery is bad. We could enslave a small population of the earth to complete a lot of great tasks, and then we could all get a lot of awesome stuff that we want, and that would be so great. But and we would all be super happy, and it outweigh the suffering that we inflict on them. But at the end of the day, slavery of any kind is of moral abhorrence, and it will never be right in any way, shape, or form. But you could justify it with utilitarianism.
Okay, good point. And then Tate, why are you slightly agree?
I pretty much agree with everything my group has said so far about utilitarianism and its many pitfalls. But on the other hand, like what you were saying about it being coded, I do think morality is kind of coded into us, but I think greed and wanting to maximize stuff for us as much as possible could also be a very part, like coded into us. I think that is a part of human nature. So like, I think it's more about doing it morally, but a lot of the times people are always going to see like the needs of the many will outweigh the needs of the few. And it's wrong, and it's not just, but sometimes it's the best answer we have. That said, I don't think it works. I don't think it's right, but it's probably going to happen again.
Okay. Now, I don't know. I want to go through every single person here. We got a lot of folks here, but one of you maybe two of you want to volunteer why you're on neutral, and why you're not quite made up your minds on this, because. Folks, we're operating from these ways of thinking about the world. Why is it that you're neutral? Who wants to throw in the fray here? Sure. Although Oscar, go.
Yeah, I'm in the middle because that's where I think it should be, in the middle. I think that everyone should operate by at least some form of moral code, because if we didn't operate by some form of moral code and we went based off of just all utilitarianism, we'd be killing each other for the perceived benefit that it was better for us. I think that having morals is good for that reason, but I also think that doing something that outweighs weighs the good and bad, I think is definitely a good way of measuring something, because there are a lot of tough choices out there, and sometimes you should apply moral principles to utilitarianism. So if it's going to save more lives, then we should do it. I mean, a good example. I mean, you talked about slavery there, but I think a good example of them mixing for the betterment is World War II and the United States deciding to enter the war because they want to stop Germany invading and killing people in innocent towns and countries and stop them from murdering 6 million Jews. So I think that's an example of the combination of them working well together.
You're talking about like the atomic bomb, or like Hiroshima?
No.
About like using that, justifying that.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
I'm talking about the invasion of Europe. I'm not talking about Japan.
Invasion.
Not talking about Japan. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to justify the atomic bomb. I think that in the long run, the atomic bomb was a bad thing. But if you study Japanese history and principles, they were never going to surrender. And if you watch the Oppenheimer movie, they're a culture that it's death before surrender, or death before dishonor, I think is the phrase that they use. And they were never going to surrender. And you talk about it in the movie, they dropped the first bomb to show that they can do it, and they dropped the second bomb to show that they can do it again. And the idea of dropping those two bombs was to get the conflict to stop because they knew Japan was never going to stop. So, I mean, it's in the long run, I think it's bad, but I think that for that situation of trying to stop the invasion that was going on in Asia, I think that, yeah, it's a tough call to make, and I think it was the lesser of two evils. But I think in that situation, weighing the benefits and the risks of it, I think was definitely a tough decision, but good to apply.
If it had been the equal number of lives in American lives, do you think it would have been worth us sacrificing to, end the war and end all that horrible thing that was going on?
Like,
because principle of utility, I mean, like equal number of lives.
Like, are you saying if Japan dropped the bomb on us and like we
no,
had those
you
same?
just snap your fingers and the same number of people, but they all happen to be in the United States instead of the innocent civilians in those areas. And if it was us, it's justified because you're weighing this number of lives, ending the war. What if they were American lives?
Well, thank God I don't got to make that choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's, as I said, it's a tough choice to make, and as I said, in the long run, I don't think it was a great choice, but I think with the options that they were presented, it was the only choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, did you want to add?
Oh, I just wanted to say that Japan offered a conditional surrender, and we rejected the conditional surrender. We wanted an unconditional surrender. What they wanted to do was keep their emperor, and we rejected that. But, yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. There's a lot of different things, but I think with the situation they had at hand, as you said, they've already rejected the unconditional surrender.
Yeah.
Or the conditional surrender, my bad. I think.
Yeah, United States rejected the conditional.
I think if you do it based off of timeline, it's still the choice that they had to make. I think if you had the benefit of hindsight, they should have taken the conditional surrender. So.
Yeah, this is just so fascinating to me because as I listen, I'm hearing these operating systems are the wheels are moving, right? And so as we contemplate a controversial topic like the U.S. government should ban animal testing, as we become self-reflexive about our own way of thinking and moving in the world, becoming aware that our differences are even more fundamental than the issue itself, but how we think about and reflect and contemplate that decision too. The disagreements can even be more fundamental, and it might be more difficult to talk about this because it starts to go up the ladder of abstraction, but it is also something at the same time I think we need to engage in to help us have those conversations across the differences that we have. So I want to thank all of you for your conversation here. I do want to say before I wrap it all up, I want to make sure everyone is heard, and if there's anyone that feels like they want to throw something in that they didn't quite get a chance to say either on the first claim or the second claim, because we still have the both of them up there. The U.S. government should ban animal testing, or operating from universal moral principles is better than utilitarianism. Is there any last thoughts or anything that you want to add to this before we close our activity here? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
If I could throw in one more thing for the animal testing.
Mm-hmm.
There are, even if you're just making a pragmatic argument, there are great alternatives to animal testing. Computer models are getting better like every day. They're already used in educational settings a lot, but that's just going to become more and more realistic. human volunteers, right? You're not violating someone's bodily autonomy if they're consenting to volunteer for these sorts of things. Also, cultured human tissue can be used in a lot of different cases, as well as you can do bacterial models. Bacteria, as far as we know, aren't sentient, so you're not really violating their rights.
So the main point would be there are alternatives.
Yes.
And quite viable alternatives would be your claim. It would be also interesting to think about the U.S. government should ban human testing too.
Right.
And how people would think on that, but I need a break, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there. So thank you all for joining me.
Thank you guys.
I gotta go to the mailroom. Thank Dr. Pennington.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep. Take care.
See you Monday.
Yeah, see you Monday.
I was like, I'm just walking over here, bro.
Thanks for joining.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
I do kind of want to know.